Next, let's talk about the CSS grid system that Bootstrap provides for you. When you start building your page layout in Bootstrap, you're going to want to start with one of two different container classes. And this will act as a box that will surround all of your content. Now, the first one is a class of container. And if you give an element a class of container, it will have a fixed width and it will center it into the middle of the screen using auto margin on both sides. So this will act as a wrapper to hold all of the elements that you put inside of it. We also have container-fluid, and the difference here is the class of container-fluid will expand to stretch across the whole viewable area of the screen. So here we get a 100% width as opposed to class container, which has a fixed width and is centered. So here you can see a demonstration of a container class, which has white space on the sides, versus the container-fluid, which will stretch all the way to the edges, this being the edge of the screen here and here. In Bootstrap, we use a class of row to create vertical separation. So here we have a container, and inside of it we have two rows. So this will create a row that will stretch horizontally and will be separated vertically from the row above or below it. So here we can see a class of container indicated with light gray, and here we've given the color aqua to each row, and you can see how the rows stack on top of each other there, and they're just as wide as the container. Now, to create horizontal separation or column structure inside of each row, we use a class of column, or COL. So you can see here that in the code in this example slide, we have a class of container, and inside of that the class of row, and inside of that we have three divs that each have a class of column-sm-4. The number on the end there, 4, is indicating that it's spanning 4 units on a 12-column structure. The SM is indicating the size at which the media queries will cause these columns to collapse so that they will no longer be positioned side by side horizontally. So here again on this diagram, we can see that the gray element here is the container, the light blue or aqua colored element is the row, and inside of it the lime green colored are the columns. So in this case, column-sm-4, and the 4 on the end there is the number of units we'd like to span within the 12-unit system. So here we have a possibility of any numbers we can put inside of the row, and those have to add up to 12 if we'd like it to span all the way across the row. Okay, so here we have 4, and 4 times 3 equals 12. So you can see that a column with a -4 on the end is going to span 1/3 of the 12-unit grid system. This next diagram shows a container with 2 rows, and here you can see that the top row has a column of SM-4, so the 4 again spanning 1/3 of the available 12-unit space, whereas down here in the second row we have a column with a -8 on the end. So 8 is spanning 8 units as opposed to 4. And here this one's taking up 2/3, whereas the SM4 is taking up 1/3. So we can put any number here on the end of our column class that's between the numbers 1 and 12. So again, the class name column dash is followed by either XS, SM, MD, or LG. These indicate the sizes: extra small, small, medium, or large. This affects the CSS media query breakpoints, or in other words, the sizes define how many pixels the columns start to stack vertically instead of horizontally. This table here shows the different class prefixes you have available: XS, SM, MD, and LG, and they show the corresponding devices that are affected by applying these class styles. So for example, if we do column-XS, that's going to affect devices that are less than 768 pixels wide, or in other words, extra small devices. So on these devices, columns that are given the -XS sizing will stay horizontal at all times. So even on these extra small devices that are less than 768 pixels, they're still going to stay horizontal and floated side by side. Now that's a little bit different than the class -SM. So here if we do column-SM, the SM represents small devices which are greater than or equal to 768 pixels. So here, when we get under 768 pixels, the columns will start to collapse, meaning that they'll start to display vertically instead of horizontally. Okay, and then greater than or equal to 768 pixels, they're actually going to maintain their horizontal positioning floating side by side. So here if we use column-MD, this will affect medium-sized devices that are greater than 992. So here, 992 and above, the column structure will maintain its horizontal side-by-side floating. Okay, and then under this size, under 992, we're actually going to see that the columns start to stack vertically. So it's the same thing here for large, column-LG. Anytime we're over 1200 pixels, we'll maintain our side-by-side column structure. However, anytime we get smaller than this large device size, the columns are going to stack vertically. Okay. So really the columns, unless you do XS, at some point when you start scaling the screen down to smaller sizes, they're going to stack vertically. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at a live code example demonstrating this. So here we can see some code that's pre-written here in Sublime Text. And we have a class of container, and that ends down here. Okay. And inside this class of container, I have 4 rows. One row for large size columns, one for medium, one for small, and one for extra small. So here I have 3 divs, and each have a class of column-large-4. And what we're going to notice is that for these columns, they're going to stay side by side until I get less than 1200 pixels, and then under 1200 pixels, we're going to notice that these guys are going to start to stack vertically. And then when we go to medium here, these are going to stay horizontal longer than the ones that have the class of large. And they're not going to start to stack vertically until we get under 992 pixels. Okay. And then the ones with the column small or SM, these ones are going to maintain their column structure even longer than medium or large, and they're going to have to get smaller than 768 pixels before they start to stack vertically. And then again, extra small devices will never stack vertically. They're always going to maintain their side-by-side relationship. So also to demonstrate the difference between container and container-fluid classes, I've went ahead and duplicated all of this code here, but I placed it inside of a container-fluid instead of a class of container. So we'll be able to see the 2 differences there and how those scale. So let's go ahead and bring this guy up in the browser. So you can see that all of the columns here that have been given a class of large are showing up as a light pink color. So here we have large, large, large. Okay. And here we have large, large, large. The only difference is that this top 4 rows here have been placed inside of a class of container, which again is centered and has a fixed width, versus giving a class of container fluid. And here you can see that these 4 rows are actually placed inside of a container fluid and therefore are stretching 100% of the screen. So right now we can see that my screen size is about over 1400 pixels, and we can see that both extra small, small, medium, and large column classes are all displaying side by side. Okay. And then as we start to scale the screen down, when we reach 1200 pixels, we're going to notice that the class that has the -LG for large devices are going to start to stack vertically. So here now we're approaching 1250. And right there you can see it happen. So here's 1201 and 1200. And now after I go a little bit smaller, below 1200, you're going to notice that at 1199 here, we're going to notice that all of the columns with the class of LG for large devices have started to stack vertically. And that's the case for, irregardless if they're inside of a container fluid or a container, they're both here starting to stack vertically. And again, large is indicated with this light pink color. Okay, we can see that the class of medium, small, and extra small are still displaying side by side. So let's go ahead and start bringing the screen in smaller. And we're going to notice that when we get down to 992, the fuchsia color, or this darker pink colored row here, is going to also stack vertically. So here we're at 994, 993, 992, and as soon as I get down to 991, you'll notice that now the classes of medium, or MD, have started to stack vertically as well. You'll also notice that the class of small, or SM, which is indicated by this green bar here, and the class of XS, or extra small, indicated by the light blue color, are still displaying horizontally. Okay. So in order to affect small, right, we have to get down below 768 pixels. Okay. So here we'll go ahead and start moving down, and we're still in the small device range. And then we'll get down to 768. So now we're at about 800. $769, 768, and there we go, 767 pixels. You'll notice that the class of SM, or small, has started to stack vertically as well. So all of the green columns are now stacked vertical. Okay. And you'll notice that if I get any smaller, the XS column will never stack vertically. So they'll always stay side by side. Essentially, they have no media query that's affecting them. Okay. So again, if we add the class of large, this is including devices that are greater than 1200 pixels, and basically under 1200 pixels, they'll start to stack vertically. And then this MD class of medium includes devices that are greater than or equal to 992 pixels. So at 992 pixels and up, these medium devices will display horizontally, normal column structure, and then below 992, they'll start to stack vertically. Okay, and then same thing for small, except small starts to stack vertically under 768, and extra small will never stack vertically. Okay, so again, to create a column, we start with the class of COL and then a hyphen, and then we specify either XS, SM, MD, or LG for large, and these will determine the CSS media query breakpoints at which columns will no longer display horizontally or side by side and will start to display vertically, in other words. Okay, and then after another hyphen, we can specify how wide this column should be, or how many spaces or units it should span within a 12 unit system. If I wanted to do one of these 8 and the other ones 4, I could go ahead and just change one of these guys to 8 and get rid of the other one here. So this is just one column spanning 8 and one column spanning 4, like so. Or if I wanted, I could do one that's like 9 and 3. Okay, etc. Or we could do, 1 and 11, or 10 and 2, right? So there's lots of different possibilities. As long as these numbers here add up to 12, I'm good to go. So let's go ahead and go back and refresh and check this out. Now that I have one, it's set at 8 and 4 and 9 and 3, and we'll be able to see the difference here. So we'll go ahead and open the screen back up again. Cool. So here you can see this one is set to 8 and 4, and this one's set to 9 and 3 here. I only changed it inside of the container fluid. So some other things you can do with columns is you can use the offset classes to shift columns over to the right. So column-small-offset-4 will actually offset the column 4 spaces, or 4 units of the 12 unit grid. Okay. So if we look below here, this code will push 2 separate 4 SM-4 columns over to the middle and right position. Okay. So here we have a class of column-SM-4. So that's going to span 4 columns. And then we've also put a space in here, and we've given it another class, which is column-small-offset-4. Okay, so here for small devices, we're going to push this column over 4. So this is actually pushing it from the left-hand side into the middle 4 units of the 12 unit grid system, and that's by using dash offset here in the middle. Okay, and because this one is offset, this last one down here will appear next to it over to the right. Okay, so essentially it's going to look like this. Again, the dark gray is the container, the aqua color here is the row, and this green here represents the divs with the classes of columns. Okay, and this first one here has the offset set to 4, hence it's getting pushed over 4 spaces this way. So the first 4 spaces would be in this area, and we've actually pushed this guy over 4 spaces using column dash small dash offset 4. So we've offset it or pushed it 4 columns over, and this one here then aligns to the last 4, right? So we have 4, 4, and 4, which adds up to 12. Okay, so again, offset will allow us to push a column over to the right. So we can also change the conventional order of columns by using push and pull classes. So push will push columns over to the right, and pull will pull columns to the left. So you can use a number to indicate how many column spaces to push or pull a column. So for example, here we have a class container, and then inside of that we have a class of row, and inside the class of row here we have a class of column dash sm dash 8. So this should span 8 of the 12 spaces. And then here we have another one with a class of column dash sm dash 4. So what you would expect is you would expect to see the first column to the left, which is this one, should be 8 units wide, or 2/3 of the available space. And then you would expect that this next column sitting on the bottom here with the class of dash sm dash 4, you'd expect this one to be all the way over to the far right, taking up only 1/3 of the space. Now we've actually adjusted the order that these appear in here by using dash push dash 4. So here we have column dash small dash push dash 4. So it's taking these 8 units here and it's pushing it over to the right 4. And then we've also pulled on this 4 and we've pulled it over 8. So it's pulling it over to the left 8, which will slip past this column width of the first column set to 8. So basically we have a column that's 8 units wide that's being pushed over 4, and we have another one that's 4 units wide that's being pulled over to the left 8. Okay, so this actually reverses these and allows them to pull or push past one another. And even though this 8 unit column is on top in the markup code and the 4 unit column is on the bottom, since we're using push and pull, we're actually going to pull this column to be the first one that shows up and push this one to be the second one that shows up. So here you can see that when we apply this, the shorter 4 unit column is on the left and the 8 unit column is on the right. So columns can also be nested inside one another by inserting a row inside of a column and then inserting additional columns inside of that inner row. So here's a quick example of that. So here we have a class of container, and inside of that we have a class of row that starts and ends here. And then inside of that we have a div with a class of column dash small dash 8. So this one is spanning 8 or 2/3 of the screen. Okay. And then next to that we have a column dash small dash 4. So this guy's only spanning 4 here. So these are side by side. Okay, this one's taking up 1/3 of the screen and this one's taking up 2/3. Now inside of the first column, which is taking up 2/3 of the screen, we've actually created another row here. And inside of that row we've established that there's 3 different columns and they're all set to take up 1/3 of that space. So essentially what I have here is a column here, here, and here that are each taking up 1/3 of this larger column, which is taking up 2/3. So what this ends up looking like here is something like this. So this is the one that is the column dash 8. This one is column dash small dash 8. Is taking up 2/3 of the space inside of the row. And then this guy here is taking up the other 1/3. And then inside of that column dash 8, we have another row, and inside of that row we're taking up 1/3 here. So there's 1, 2 3/3 that are appearing here. So next, let's go ahead and jump back over to our code along example, and we'll practice adding a layout using Bootstrap CSS grid system.